She didn't cry when they took her away in chains. She didn't beg. She didn't shout about injustice. In that courtroom, no one let her speak. But everything changed when a man stepped through the door. A man whose name this town had tried to bury. This is the story of a woman no one wanted to hear, until the truth found its voice. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today, I'm telling you about a town that betrayed the weak just to keep the illusion of order. About a woman whose name no one remembered, and a man who came back to remind them that forgetting is its own kind of crime. Ready to find out how silence became a weapon? Then hit that like button now, and let's begin. The courthouse in Elm Creek was old. It smelled of dust, damp paper, and something tired. Flags hung limp on the walls, faded like the belief that justice still lived beneath them. Behind the long bench sat a man whose eyes had seen too many years. His face carved into the shape of someone who forgot how to doubt. His robe was pressed, his gavel polished. But the way his hand trembled around it made it clear. Even he wasn't sure what justice looked like anymore. On the defendant's bench sat a young woman in a dark dress, too large for her narrow shoulders. Her hair was pulled into a tight knot, face pale, lips pressed together. She hadn't said a word since her arrest. No fight, no plea, no protest. Just stillness, like her body had learned to endure what her spirit no longer could. Her name, as far as the records went, was Abby, a housemaid in Mayor Harrison Coles's mansion. The mayor had been found dead 3 weeks earlier, poisoned. A half-empty glass on the desk. And next to it, a vial of belladonna. The rumors ran faster than the sheriff could read her rights. She keeps to herself, they whispered at the bakery. Too skinny, like she's hiding something, they muttered at the post office. By the time she was led out of the house in cuffs, the townsfolk had already gathered on both sides of the street. Someone threw a clump of mud. Someone else spat. No one said, "What if this is a mistake?" The courtroom was packed. Even the men who never missed a domino game at Ben's saloon put down their cards to watch it. Not for truth, but for a show. Some chewed peanuts. Others rubbed their hands together, eager. Her lawyer, a quiet man named George Kane, sweated through his collar like he was standing under desert sun. He hadn't asked a single question. Hadn't stood once all morning. "This right here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said, holding up the little vial, "is belladonna, devil's herb. 1 drop and the heart stops." The crowd stirred, a hum of agreement. But no one asked, what'd she gain from this? No one wondered why the vial was found in the mayor's own drawer, or how a girl earning $1 a week could even afford such a poison. The kind even apothecaries locked away. No one remembered that the mayor had been complaining of chest pains for a month, and that Dr. Lansky had been giving him drops nearly every day. The judge cleared his throat. Defense? George Kane stood, fingers fidgeting with a button on his vest. Members of the jury. I don't believe we have any real proof. That's enough, the judge snapped. Sit down. Someone in the courtroom chuckled. The girl didn't flinch. Only her eyes, those same eyes folks said blinked too little, moved across the room, not searching for help, just scanning the faces to see who'd be the first to strip away what little dignity she had left. The stable boy, same one who once brought her an apple, now stared at the floor like it owed him something. The old baker lady she used to buy bread from had turned her head away. Even Sheriff Marshall, the one who once asked if she felt safe, now stood by the door like a man guarding the road to the gallows. The verdict hadn't been read. But in a place like this, no one needed words. Truth didn't live in testimony. It lived in whispers, in looks, in how easily folks forget someone else's pain when it's not their own. The judge called for a recess. They let her out. The chains on her wrists rattled like a winter bell in the dead of night. Elm Creek went back to its lunch, not talking about guilt or innocence, but about how soon they'd hang her. The Red Horse Saloon in Elm Creek was never quiet. Even in the middle of the day, there were clinking glasses, floorboards groaning, and an out-of-tune piano grinding out half melodies. But that day, the air was still, like right before a storm. Conversation died the second the door swung open. A man stepped inside, his skin sunburned to ash gray, his eyes sharp and dry like the edge of a blade. He walked in slow, like he was weighing the air with every step. Dust shook loose from his coat, settling behind him like the wind didn't dare touch his back. His hat sat low, hiding most of his face. On his hip, an old revolver, worn smooth at the grip. He took a seat in the far corner, didn't remove his coat, and ordered coffee. Black. Said nothing else. The bartender set down the cup and stepped back. No one asked where he came from. No one dared sit closer. Even the piano player stopped mid-bar, hands frozen above the keys. Only old Tom Weaver, a veteran who'd left a leg behind at Mission Bend, got up, leaning heavy on his cane, and made his way over. "You wouldn't be Jack Maddox, would you?" His voice was rough, but steady. The man didn't lift his head. Only his fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "I figured you were dead," Tom said, watching the shadow under the brim. "And if you weren't, figured you'd never come back here." The silence thickened, like steam off a boiling pot. "She ain't yours," Tom added, quieter now. "That's what folks say. Just a maid from Coles's place. Alone. Hired help." Maddox finally looked up. Slowly. His eyes were pale gray. Cold. Like river ice that never melts, even in spring. "That's the whole problem," he said. Then turned back to his coffee. He didn't speak again. Tom stepped back, like he'd been pushed. Behind them, chairs creaked. People shifted. But no one spoke. The name Jack Maddox had always carried wind behind it. The kind that smells like gunpowder, old sin, and unfinished business. He sat there, drinking cold coffee and staring out through the fogged-up window. And his silence said more than words ever could. He hadn't come back by accident. It happened 2 years before the trial. Back then, he went by a different name. Around Elm Creek, folks just called him the man from the flats. He'd come to the Coles estate on the mayor's own request, security, they said. For a few weeks, he stood guard during meetings, lingered in the shadows by the staircase, listened without asking questions. One night, he stayed a little longer than usual. Down the hallway, through a half-open dining room door, he heard a voice. Loud, jagged, cracking like drywood. Then came the sound of a blow. Heavy, flesh on flesh, and a soft, stifled sob. He wasn't supposed to interfere. He wasn't the sheriff, wasn't her husband, wasn't even a friend. But he pushed the door open. Mayor Coles stood over the girl. Back then, she was barely more than a kid. Her apron torn, cheek burning red from the slap, lip split, eyes down. "You want worse?" the mayor growled. "Then get up. You hear me? Get up." "That's enough," Jack said. His voice was low, even, but something in it made Coles take a step back. They stared at each other in silence. After a long beat, Coles wiped his mouth, muttered something like, "Didn't happen," and slammed the door on his way out. The girl didn't look at Jack. She stayed on her knees, palms flat on the floor. He wanted to help her up, but she didn't let him. So he walked away, didn't say a word, didn't show up the next day. He vanished, like anyone else who ever tried to push back against the weight of power in Elm Creek. The name Man from the Flats was never spoken in that house again. But Jack never forgot what he saw. Her fragile frame, folded on the floor. And the kind of silence that's louder than screaming. From that night on, he knew he'd come back. The only question was when. Elm Creek held its breath. The streets looked the same that morning. The smell of fresh bread drifting from the corner bakery. A lazy trail of smoke curling above the church roof. The old well chain squeaking behind the pharmacy. But it all felt like a stage set. Beneath the stillness, something stirred. No one said it out loud. But everyone knew. He was back. Jack Maddox. A name that made old men look away. And made younger ones, who'd never really known fear, understand, for the first time, how heavy silence can be. He sat in the same corner booth, a blackened coffee cup in hand, eyes fixed, unmoving. He didn't speak, didn't act, didn't need to. Everyone who passed the Red Horse Saloon felt a chill trace their spine, like somewhere inside that building. A single candle was burning, quiet, but strong enough to melt through the town's thin shell of peace. By noon, Sheriff Brandon Holt stepped through the saloon doors. Same dark blue uniform he always wore, but his shoulders sat lower, and the badge on his chest looked less like steel and more like weight. "Maddox," he said quietly. Jack didn't move, just slowly turned his eyes. "Just passing through?" Brandon asked. doing his best to keep the balance in his voice. Silence. Look. The sheriff rubbed his temple, searching for the words. I don't want things getting out of hand. Town's already tense. Folks are nervous. You know how they get. Yeah, Jack said calmly. They get nervous when the truth shows up looking em in the eye. Brandon pressed his lips into a tight line. This ain't your fight, Jack. No, he said with a slow nod. But I'm part of why it started. I knew she was alone. I knew she wasn't silent 'cause she was guilty. She was silent 'cause no one ever listened. Brandon looked away. There was a trial. A jury. Evidence. It followed the law. Jack leaned back. Law's what you write down. Justice is what you feel. And you know the difference. A beat of silence. Brandon exhaled. You're not planning to break her out, are you? No, Jack replied. That's not why I'm here. He paused. I'm here to remind you who you were. Before the fear. Before the lies. The sheriff nodded. Not in agreement. But like a man accepting a weight he couldn't set down. He turned and left without another word. Outside, where a hay cart had just rumbled past, the town went still again. So quiet. You could hear the old Red Horse sign creak in the wind. And in that quiet, the people of Elm Creek knew. Change didn't come like a storm. It came walking. And from the baker to the preacher, they all felt it. Nothing in Elm Creek would be the same again. The courthouse in Elm Creek filled long before sunrise. Benches creaked under the weight of tense bodies. Fans fluttered in nervous hands like the wings of startled birds. Men held their hats. Women hid their eyes behind lace veils. And the few children present sat in eerie silence. Not out of fear, but something heavier. A sense. Like the town already knew what the day would bring. It was sentencing day. On the defendant's bench sat the same figure. Slim. Still. Carved from chalk, it seemed. Abby hadn't changed. Same chains on her wrists. Same expression, void of fear, void of hope. Only silence. The kind that settles in right before the sun drops too fast behind a ridge. Judge Grant looked worn out. A Bible sat near his elbow, untouched. He was already bracing himself. Not for justice, but for the final words that bring things to an end. Like a seal pressed onto a letter that no one wants to open. Miss, he said, do you have anything to say before this court delivers its final ruling? She didn't lift her head. Just a slight pull of the chain on her wrists. A whisper rippled through the benches. The judge gave a slow nod. Then by the laws of... The door creaked open. Not loud, but like a draft breaking through a room that had been shut too long. He stepped in slowly, wearing a coat the color of old gunpowder. His hat casting a deep shadow over his face. No one moved. Not even the judge dared interrupt the sound of those footsteps. Jack Maddox walked to the center of the courtroom and stopped behind Abby. She's my wife, he said. The words didn't echo. They cracked, like a bullet fired into still air. A woman in the front row dropped her fan. A child coughed somewhere in the back. Someone murmured a prayer. The judge arched a brow. Who the hell are you? Jack Maddox, he answered flatly. And I'll say it again. She's my wife. This is outrageous, the judge snapped, rising. You're obstructing justice. No, Jack said. I'm straightening it. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded document. Moved slowly, carefully, like he was holding something more sacred than paper. Marriage certificate, he said. Filed in Silver Creek. 2 years ago. Before any of this started. The judge snatched the paper, skimming it quickly. Sheriff Holt stepped closer. His hands unsteady as he glanced down. He recognized the names. The dates. And the shift. Nothing would be simple now. Even if it's true, the judge muttered. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything, Jack said quietly. Because you all asked why she was alone. Why no one spoke for her. It's because no one knew. No one listened. She stayed silent not because she was guilty, but because every time she asked for help, you turned away. The judge lifted his gavel. This is a courtroom, not a place for personal drama. Jack took a step toward Abby, his face blank. Only his voice carried weight. You're not alone anymore. And in that moment, her shoulders trembled, not from fear, but from hearing something she hadn't dared let herself believe. The gavel hovered in the air. The room held its breath. No one looked at the judge. They were all looking at her. And in those eyes, always quiet, always still like winter water, Something new began to glow. Hope. Jack didn't back down. He stood in the center of the courtroom like a man who'd already been through the worst. His hands shook, just barely, not from fear, but from memory. She never asked to be saved, he said, but she asked to be seen. He reached into his coat and pulled out another document. Worn, yellowed, fragile with time. He handed it to the sheriff, who took it like it might burn. His eyes scanned it. His mouth twitched. Then he nodded. The document passed from hand to hand. The judge read it last. He cleared his throat. Said nothing. Medical report, Jack said. Signed by Dr. Lansky. Bruises. Broken ribs. Internal bleeding. A year ago. Cause of injury listed as fell down the stairs. He paused. Only thing is, stairs don't leave marks on your neck. A murmur swept the room. Someone in the back row sat up straighter. It was Mrs. Ellis, the baker. Her voice trembled like a dry leaf in wind. I saw him push her. One time. She didn't come out for a whole day afterward. I told myself it wasn't my place. Her words floated in the still air. Then Maggie, the maid from the mayor's house, stood up. He made her kneel during dinner. Said it was about discipline. I wanted to quit. But I was scared. I got kids. Then a bench creaked. The old piano man from the saloon. I saw the bruises. Way before folks started whispering. Figured it wasn't my business. God, I'm ashamed of that now. Voices started falling like rain no one saw coming. One after another. The ones who had stayed quiet were now speaking. The ones who looked away were finally meeting her eyes. And Abby. She sat still. Like she couldn't quite believe any of it was real. The judge didn't try to stop it. He slumped in his chair. Like air had gone out of him. Jack turned back to the room. You all knew. In your own way. And still you said nothing. Because it was easier. Easier to believe she was the problem than to admit you were part of it. His words didn't sound like blame. They were calm. And that made them hit harder. But today, he said, you started speaking. And that means it's not too late. The room went still. Not with guilt. But with something cleaner. A silence you can start over in. And Abby lifted her head. For the first time. Not to look around. But to meet the eyes of those who had finally chosen to see her. Maggie Harper stood in the narrow hallway just outside the courtroom. Her fingers clenched around the hem of her apron. She quit working at the Coles house right after the mayor died. Told herself it was safer that way. But every time she passed a mirror, she didn't see her own face. She saw Abby's. Those same hollow eyes. The kind that had run out of both tears and questions. Why you? She whispered to herself. This ain't your fight anymore. Not yours. Inside the courtroom, voices rose one by one. Confessions, reckonings. And she stood there, frozen to the floor like her shoes had taken root. Her knees trembled. Her heart fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. One thought spun over and over in her mind. What if I lose my next job? What if they say I'm lying to protect myself? Who's going to believe me now? She remembered one night. The mayor ordered Abby to bring tea. Even though she was clearly burning with fever, Abby could barely hold the tray. She almost dropped it. Coles didn't yell. He didn't have to. He simply poured the tea out onto the floor slowly. Then smiled. The kind of smile that chills worse than a clenched fist. Maggie knew. Even then, she should have done something. Said something. Anything. But she just grabbed a rag and cleaned the mess. You knew he hit her, she whispered now, not sure who she was talking to. You saw it. Behind the door's silence. Someone had just finished speaking. Time seemed to stretch thin. And that's when she knew. If not now, never. Maggie wiped her hands on her apron, lifted her chin, and stepped toward the door. Slow, like walking to the gallows. But each step felt lighter than the last. She didn't know what she'd say. Didn't need to. She just knew one thing. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Judge Grant sat hunched over the bench. Not under the weight of paperwork, but under decades of silence that wasn't his. Yet lived in his courtroom like a shadow. His hands rested on the armrests, but his fingers clenched. First one at a time, then all together. As if trying to find the last traces of control in his grip, the gavel lay beside him. Abandoned, useless, like a meal no one bothered to finish. He slowly rose to his feet. His face looked paler than it had that morning. The lines on it, deeper now, like truth had cut them in light of the new testimonies. He began. His voice trembled. Not from weakness, but from the breaking of something he once believed was solid. The court will enter recess to re-examine the case and call for further witness testimony. Final judgment is postponed. A soft rustle passed through the courtroom. Like wind moving across a wheat field. People glanced at each other. Someone let out a breath. Another stiffened. It wasn't a victory, but it was something. Like a fire cracking to life. In the coldest corner of a winter cabin. Small, uncertain, but warm. The judge lowered himself back into the chair. This time, not as an authority, but simply a man. Sheriff Holt approached Abby. He didn't rush. The key clicked in the lock. A quiet sound, but one that would stay with her forever. The chain slipped from her wrists and landed on the bench with a soft, final rattle. She stared at them, like they were dead snakes that had finally lost their venom. The sheriff didn't look her in the eye. He just opened the door and motioned for her to walk free. She rose. Her steps weren't triumphant, just steady, like someone who'd spent too long on their knees. Outside, the light hit different. The sun was still the sun, but it no longer burned. The crowd didn't scatter right away. Some waited for more. Some waited for closure. But none of them walked away without hearing a voice inside say, "We got it wrong." Elm Creek wasn't the same anymore. Something had been pulled from its heart. An old, rusted arrow that had been lodged there for too long. And sure, the wounds still hurt. But for the first time in years, the town could breathe. Morning came quiet to Elm Creek. No roosters crowed. No clang from the blacksmith shop. It was as if the town itself knew. Today was the day it had to face its own reflection. The first to move was Dr. Lansky. He appeared at the sheriff's door, with a leather bag in one hand, and papers in the other. Papers he'd kept hidden for years. His face was pale, like he'd spent the night confessing his sins, not sleeping. I didn't tell the whole truth back then, he said, handing over the documents. Not because I didn't know, because I was scared. But now, I'm more scared of staying quiet. Sheriff Holt took the papers. His hands didn't shake, but something heavier settled behind his eyes. He nodded once and said, "You're not the first, but be the example, not the exception." The streets began to stir. The town's baker, who had started his dough at dawn, took off his apron, put on his coat, and walked toward the church. His wife followed. Then the saloon's piano player. Then the boy from the stables. Some walked slowly, some with a kind of shame in their steps, but they all moved with purpose. Court couldn't go on in the building, where the ceiling itself felt soaked in lies. So they moved it to the old wooden church on the hill, where the walls still remembered prayers, and the benches creaked not with wear, but with truth. And then she came, Abby, not in chains, no guards, just a plain dress that no longer looked like a servant's rags, but a symbol of something unbending. She stood before them, those same eyes, deep, quiet. But now, they weren't empty. "I didn't kill him," she said, softly, but loud enough that no one could miss it. A pause, a breath drawn somewhere deep in the pews. "I wanted to, more than once, but I didn't, because even if he died, the town would still be the same. The silence would still be here, the kind of silence that kills slower than poison." But just as sure, she looked around at the people, the ones who used to turn away, and said, "I kept quiet because I hoped someone would speak for me. I won't make that mistake again." And in that voice, there was more justice than any prosecutor had ever delivered. The church in Elm Creek felt, for the first time, like a place built not just for hymns, but for truth, hard truth, unvarnished, spoken out loud and carried by walls that had heard everything but never this. Under its colored glass, nothing sparkled. The stained windows didn't glow. They trembled. Abby stood near the altar, framed by pews filled with the very people who'd passed her by for years. She didn't give a speech. There was no polish in her words, just honesty, and that, somehow, was harder to look away from. "I was angry," she said, "every day, when he called me names. When he grabbed my arm if I didn't move fast enough. When he tossed coins at me like scraps. I was angry, because he knew no one would ever step in between us. She paused. No one moved. Even the old floorboards seemed to hold their breath. I saw the vial. I knew where he kept it, and I thought about it. Every time he left a mark. Every night I prayed he wouldn't open my door. Her voice didn't shake. It was dry and worn, like soil that hadn't seen rain in years. But I didn't kill him, because I didn't want him dead. I just wanted him to see me. See a person. Just once. A soft sob broke from the back pews. A woman covered her face. A young man at the window crushed his cap in both hands. Then Maggie stood. I watched her scrub his floor with a fever. He laughed, and I said nothing. The piano man rose. 2 years ago. I handed her a cloth to wipe blood off her hand. Then I threw it away. I was scared to be involved. The baker followed. He paid her to keep quiet. We paid with silence. Because it was easier. One by one, they spoke. And with every confession, you could almost see the dust fall off them. Like shame shaken loose after years of hiding. Judge Grant sat motionless on the bench. His old robe draped over his shoulders, like it no longer fit, or like he forgot what part he was supposed to play. He stood, removed the robe slowly, folded it, set it on the table in front of him. I heard it, he said. The way folks in this town talked about you. I heard it. And I said nothing. Today, I hear you. For the first time. And maybe it's too late for justice. But not for truth. He turned to the room. I can't pass judgment. Because I wasn't her judge. You were. And now, you'll have to decide what kind of people you want to be from here on out. And in the silence that followed, no one felt triumphant. What they felt was a beginning. The kind that comes when the quietest voice in town finally becomes the one that matters most. The next morning, the doors of the sheriff's office opened without a sound. No guards, no chains, no shouts, just morning lights spilling across the stone floor. And footsteps, unshackled and sure. Abby stepped out, slowly, like she had to relearn how to move. Because freedom isn't some door swinging open into a new life. It's the moment you realize you have no map. Because you've been standing still for far too long. She didn't look back. No reason to. What was behind her wasn't home. Wasn't work. Wasn't even the past. Back there was a shadow. The one she used to live in. Now ahead of her was nothing but a dirt road, stretched thin by the wind. And a morning that, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a sentence. At the edge of Elm Creek, right where the old road sign stood peeling in the sun, Jack waited, hat pulled low, hands in his pockets. His silhouette was familiar in a way that stung. He didn't move toward her, didn't call out, just stood there, close enough that she could choose. Abby walked to him, no rush, like she was walking the silence that still lived between them. You leaving? She asked. Jack nodded, didn't look at her, just said, this town's yours now, not mine. Nothing left here for me. She looked at the road, disappearing over the ridge. Then at him. I don't want to walk it alone. He raised his eyes, for the first time, and in them, there was no question, no claim, not even hope, just quiet, the kind you could live inside, if neither of you dared break it. But he did. Then let's go. They walked, not holding hands, not side by side exactly, but step for step, as if everything they'd been through hadn't broken them, just earned them the right to keep going. And behind them, Elm Creek faded into the dust. No anger, no farewell, just a place where the truth had once found its voice, and now walked down that road, right alongside them. By evening, the road brought them to a low wooden building at a crossroads. An old tavern with a faded sign swinging on rusted chains, like it had grown tired of waiting for travelers to stop. Etched into the wood, the name read, Mercy's Rest. The words sounded like a warm breath after years of holding one in. Inside, it was nearly empty. A lone lantern above the bar cast a soft amber glow. The air smelled of stew, wood, and something old, but kind. Behind the bar stood a woman in her 60s, with strong hands, and eyes that had seen too much to be unkind. She looked at Abby, then at Jack, gave a quiet nod. Room second on the left, she said. No questions unless you're a skin dot. That was all. She said nothing else. They sat by the fire. Not close. Not far. Just near enough to hear each other breathe. Without disturbing the quiet, Jack ordered food. Simple. Stewed beans, fresh bread, a slice of warm pie. No toasts. No talk of what's next. Just a meal. Real. Honest. Abby hadn't eaten all day. Maybe not since yesterday. Or maybe since the day she stopped tasting anything at all. She held the spoon like she wasn't sure she remembered how to use it. Jack didn't look at her. He just ate. Slow and steady, the way he always did. Then he slid his plate toward her. You want some? She nodded. Took a few bites. Pushed it back. But he nudged it gently closer. Eat. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a command. It was something else. A shield made of habit, not heroics. When the food was gone, they sat and watched the fire. And in that silence, there was more truth than in 1,000 conversations. Why'd you want to leave alone? She asked quietly. Her voice even, almost calm. Figured you wouldn't want someone around. Who reminded you of all this? He answered, still staring at the flames. Did you want to stay? No, he said. But I would have if you'd asked. She nodded. Looked down at the cup of water in her hands. Ran her fingers around the rim. I don't know what comes next, she said. But right now, for the first time in a long time, I'm not scared. He didn't reply. Just slid the blanket from the bench a little closer to her. She took it, wrapped it around her shoulders, and sat still, not tense, not waiting, just at rest, like someone who hadn't found home, but found a place to stop. And in that hush, with firewood crackling, and the soft breath of night settling in, something new was born between them. Not love, not another weight to carry, just a chance, a quiet one, real, so rare, they didn't dare name it. Mercy's Rest, a place to breathe. They didn't know how long they'd stay, but they knew one thing for sure. This night was theirs. If this story moved you, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for being here with us. We'll see you next time.